Dear Ellen, I know it's been 6 months since I last saw you. The divorce papers are finalized now, and I've moved into a small studio apartment downtown. The elegant handwriting blurred as unexpected tears welled in my eyes. After 25 years of marriage, Richard Parker's apology letter arrived not through a heartfelt conversation, but as misdelivered mail to my neighbor's house. How fitting. I stood on my balcony overlooking the garden I'd planted 3 seasons ago, clutching the letter in one hand and a glass of Cabernet in the other. Through the evening shadows, I could see directly into what used to be our home, the house where I'd raised our daughter, hosted countless dinner parties, and silently written most of Richard's acclaimed business presentations while he took all the credit. Now, new neighbors were moving in, a young family with hope in their eyes. And Richard? He was starting over honestly this time, according to his letter. No shortcuts, no riding on anyone else's success. A gentle breeze carried the scent of my blooming gardenias as I watched the young mother arrange furniture in what used to be my living room. How strange that the place that once represented my deepest humiliation now evoked only a calm detachment. The wrenching pain of discovery, the icy shock of betrayal, the calculated patience of my response, all of it had transformed into something else entirely. Mom? Amy's voice called softly from behind me. My 22-year-old daughter stepped onto the balcony, her eyes moving from the letter in my hand to my face. Are you okay? I smiled, genuinely. I'm more than okay. Amy leaned against the railing beside me, studying the new family next door. Hard to believe it's been 6 months since Dad told you to pack up and leave. And we've both come a long way since then, I replied, folding Richard's letter and slipping it into my pocket. Are you going to respond? She asked. No, I said simply. I don't need to. My phone buzzed with a message from Michael Bennett, the company's board chairman. Peer department exceeding projections by 18%. The board is thrilled with your leadership. I showed it to Amy, who beamed with pride. Who would have thought Dad kicking you out would lead to all of this? I looked around at my beautiful home, technically the house next door to my former marital residence, and felt a wave of satisfaction. I did, I answered honestly. I always knew exactly who I was. Your father just never bothered to find out. This is the story of how I rebuilt my life at 55, right next door to the man who betrayed me, and discovered that the sweetest revenge isn't revenge at all, it's reclaiming your own power. Flashback, the betrayal. 6 months earlier, I stood in the kitchen of our colonial home in Sunnyside Estates, methodically chopping vegetables for dinner while half listening to Richard's voice coming from his study. At 58, my husband still maintained the confident tone that had served him well in the investment banking world, though few knew how much coaching I had provided behind the scenes. The Singapore expansion is absolutely a go, he was saying. I've secured the Tanaka account personally. I smiled faintly at the word personally. I had spent 3 weeks researching Japanese business etiquette and drafting the perfect proposal for that account. Richard had merely delivered it with his practiced charm. The chopping knife paused in my hand. When had I started keeping this mental ledger of unacknowledged contributions? Perhaps around our 15th anniversary, when I realized Richard's promises about my someday career were just that, as someone's that would never arrive. His voice dropped lower, and I found myself unconsciously straining to hear. No, I told you, she doesn't suspect anything. Yes, of course, I'm sure. No, don't worry about that. The knife resumed its rhythm against the cutting board. For months, I had been aware of small changes, late nights at the office, new cologne, text messages that made him smile in a way I hadn't seen in years. Richard wasn't particularly creative with his deceptions. Perhaps he hadn't needed to be. I had always been the accommodating wife. 20 minutes later, Richard emerged from his study with an expression I immediately recognized, the carefully arranged face of a man about to deliver unpleasant news while minimizing his own discomfort. Ellen, he said, loosening his tie, we need to talk. I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel, my face neutral. About what? I've been doing a lot of thinking lately. About life. About what I want. He paused, seemingly waiting for me to make this easier for him. When I didn't, he continued. I think we've grown apart. I'm not happy anymore. I see. My calm response clearly wasn't what he expected. And does this realization have anything to do with Vanessa Mitchell from the marketing department? The flash of shock in his eyes would have been satisfying if it hadn't been so painful. Richard recovered quickly. How did you? 25 years of marriage, Richard. I noticed things. He straightened, adopting the authoritative posture he used with junior associates. Well, since you know, I won't insult your intelligence. Yes, Vanessa and I have developed feelings for each other. She understands me in ways that. Spare me the cliches, I interrupted, surprising both of us. Just tell me what you want. His eyes darted around the kitchen, our kitchen, before meeting mine. I want a divorce. And I'd like to keep the house. Vanessa will be moving in this weekend. The knife I'd been using clattered to the floor, the only outward sign of my distress. This weekend? You expect me to pack up 25 years and leave in 2 days? I'll be generous with the settlement, he said, as if offering a business concession. You can take whatever furniture you want, and I'll cover the security deposit on a rental across town. How thoughtful. My voice was calm, betraying none of the calculations already forming in my mind. And Amy? Have you thought about how this affects her? Richard waved dismissively. She's 22 in college. She's an adult now. Besides, she'll understand once she meets Vanessa. She's closer to Amy's age than yours, after all. The casual cruelty of this comparison hung in the air between us. I bent to retrieve the fallen knife, using the moment to compose myself. When I straightened, I asked only one question. Does Sarah Reynolds still have the listing for the house next door? Confusion crossed his face. What? Yes, I think so. Why? I placed the knife in the sink with deliberate care. No reason. I need to make a call. Flashback, the foundation. My mother had always told me to maintain financial independence, even in marriage. Men come and go, Ellen, she'd say, folding laundry in our modest Chicago apartment. But your own money stays loyal. As a young bride at 30, I had found her cynicism depressing. Richard and I were in love. We were a team. Still, her words had stuck with me enough that I'd opened a separate savings account early in our marriage, adding to it steadily from my paycheck during the years I worked in corporate communications before Amy was born. After becoming a mother, I'd shifted to freelance work, ghostwriting articles, and editing business communications while supporting Richard's career. Each time I received payment, I'd deposit a portion into my private account, a habit that continued even as my contributions to Richard's career became more substantial and less acknowledged. I don't understand why you bother with those little writing jobs, Richard had commented once, watching me edit an article late at night. It's not like we need the money. I enjoy it, I'd answered simply, not mentioning the growing balance in my separate account or the satisfaction I felt maintaining this small piece of financial autonomy. Over the years, that account had grown substantially, enough to provide security, though I'd never imagined using it to buy the house next door to my marital home. But life has a way of presenting unexpected opportunities. When Sarah Reynolds called me back that evening, her voice was professional but warm. Ellen, what can I do for you? The Collins property next door, is it still available? Yes, but there's been considerable interest. The open house last weekend, I'd like to make an all-cash offer, I said, surprising myself with my directness. At asking price. It paused. Ellen, are you sure? That's significant. And right next door to your current home? I'm aware of the location, Sarah. I allowed a hint of dry humor to enter my voice. Richard has asked for a divorce. He's keeping our house. I need somewhere to live, and I'd prefer not to uproot entirely. Another pause. I see. To her credit, Sarah maintained her professionalism. I'll prepare the paperwork immediately. With an all-cash offer at asking price, I don't anticipate any issues with the sellers accepting. 3 days later, as Richard helped Vanessa carry her designer suitcases into our former home, I stood in the driveway of number 47 Maple Street, keys in hand, watching their shock as Sarah hammered the sold sign into the lawn. At the new house, Mom, where do you want these books? Amy called from upstairs, her voice echoing through the empty rooms of my new home. The built-in shelves in the study, I answered, running my hand along the smooth granite countertop of the kitchen island. The house was smaller than our former home, but with elegant touches and large windows that flooded the space with afternoon light. Most importantly, from the living room window, I had a perfect view of my old house. Not that I intended to spend my days as a voyeur, but the strategic advantage of my location wasn't lost on me. Richard would have to see me building my new life, day by day, whether he wanted to or not. The doorbell rang, and I opened it to find Dan Thompson standing there with a toolbox. At 60, the retired lawyer still maintained the sharp alertness that had made him formidable in court. Thought you might need some help setting up security cameras, he said, his eyes kind beneath bushy gray eyebrows. Perimeter protection is important, especially for a woman living alone. I hadn't even thought about security yet, I admitted. Thank you, Dan. He set down his toolbox. Least I can do. The whole neighborhood's talking about that stunt Richard pulled. He shook his head. 25 years of marriage, and he gives you 2 days' notice? Always thought he was a decent fellow, despite the ego. I appreciated Dan's straightforwardness. After decades of carefully measuring my words to protect Richard's image, honesty felt refreshing. Men in midlife crisis do predictable things, I said, stepping back to let him in. Trading in wives like cars for newer models with fewer miles. Still, Dan said, surveying the entryway with a professional eye, moving in right next door. That's either masochistic or brilliant. Let's go with brilliant, I smiled. The first genuine smile I'd managed in days. Coffee? Love some. Then I'll install these cameras so you can have some peace of mind. As I prepared coffee in my new kitchen, the doorbell rang again. This time it was Margaret, my colleague from the public relations department where I'd worked before becoming primarily Richard's behind-the-scenes support. At 53, Margaret had survived her own divorce a decade earlier and emerged stronger for it. Housewarming, she announced, holding up a bottle of good red wine and a bag of takeout. Her sharp eyes took in my appearance, the simple jeans and sweater I'd worn for moving, so different from the carefully maintained corporate wife image I'd projected for years. How are you really doing? I hesitated, searching for the right words. I'm still figuring that out. Margaret nodded, understanding in her eyes. That's honest, at least. The first few months are about surviving. Then you start rebuilding. Mom. Amy's voice called urgently from the living room. Dad's coming over. Sure enough, through the front window, I could see Richard marching across the lawn that separated our properties, his face a mask of controlled fury. I'll handle this, I said quietly, moving toward the door. Richard reached the front steps just as I opened the door. His tall frame, still fit at 58 despite his thinning gray hair, blocked the afternoon sun. What is this? He demanded, gesturing at the house around me. You bought this place? I leaned against the doorframe, acutely aware of Margaret, Dan, and Amy watching from inside. Is there a problem? Problem? Richard's voice rose slightly before he controlled it, ever conscious of appearance. You were supposed to move across town. Not where you'd have to see me? I finished for him, keeping my tone even. You didn't specify a minimum distance requirement when you told me to leave our home of 25 years. His hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. This is harassment. That word, so casually deployed to reframe his discomfort as my transgression, ignited something in me. A quiet anger I'd suppressed for years. Harassment? I repeated, my voice low but clear. That's rich coming from the man who moved his mistress into our home and gave his wife of 25 years 2 days to pack up and leave. Ellen, you're making this deliberately difficult, he said, his voice dropping to a hiss. No, Richard, I replied, feeling a strange calm settle over me. I'm making this educational. You wanted me gone but didn't specify how far. Now you get to watch me rebuild my life, right next door. Mom? Amy called from inside. Where do you want the desk? In your study? Richard's jaw tightened as he realized our daughter was actively helping me move in. Amy's helping you? She made that choice all on her own, I said, allowing a hint of pride to color my voice. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have unpacking to do. This isn't over, Ellen, he warned, stepping back. You're right about that. I closed the door quietly but firmly in his face. Inside, Margaret was already opening the wine while Dan returned to his security camera installation. Amy had claimed the sunny bedroom upstairs as her second room for when she visited from college. "Did you see his face?" Margaret asked, handing me a glass of Cabernet. "Absolute shock that you didn't just disappear as instructed." I took a sip, savoring both the wine and the moment. He's used to people, especially women, following his directives without question. "He's calling her," Amy reported from the window, where she couldn't resist watching her father's retreat. Vanessa looks upset. Despite my determination not to be a voyeur, I found myself joining Amy at the window. Through the large kitchen windows of my former home, I could see Vanessa gesturing animatedly, her sleek blonde hair catching the light as she paced. At 34, she was beautiful in that polished way that requires considerable maintenance, the kind of woman who would expect a man like Richard to provide that maintenance indefinitely. "You know what the most ironic part is?" I said quietly to Amy. "Your father thinks this is about making his life difficult. He can't imagine I'd make any significant decision that doesn't revolve around him." "What is it about then?" Amy asked, her perceptive eyes, so like my own, studying my face. I looked around at my new home, smaller but all mine, purchased with money I'd quietly saved over decades. "It's about finally taking up space in my own life," I said. "Something I should have done years ago. Observation and growth." By the third week in my new home, I had established a peaceful routine. Mornings were for coffee on the garden patio, where I could enjoy the early sunlight filtering through the Japanese maple trees I'd planted. I'd then retreat to my study to work on the business communications articles I'd been writing for years. Only now I was submitting them under my own name rather than ghostwriting for others. The irony didn't escape me that I could see Richard's home office window from my garden. For years, I'd helped prepare his presentations, edit his reports, even draft emails to important clients, all while he took the credit. Now, I was finally claiming my own expertise. "You really should consider submitting some of these ideas to business journals," Margaret said one afternoon as she reviewed an article I'd written about crisis communication strategies. We sat in my sunny kitchen, laptops open and coffee mugs steaming between us. "This is exactly the kind of practical insight executives need." I hesitated, decades of self-effacement hard to overcome. "I've never published under my own name." "Exactly," Margaret's eyes gleamed with conviction. "Time to change that. You've been the brains behind Richard's success for years. The world deserves to know what you can do." A crash from next door interrupted our conversation. Through my kitchen window, I could see Vanessa on the back patio, gesturing wildly at what appeared to be a landscaper. "You've ruined everything," her voice carried across the yard. "These aren't the flowers I specified." Nothing is Instagram worthy. The middle-aged landscaper, who had maintained both properties for years, was shaking his head in obvious frustration. I recognized him as Mr. Gonzalez, who had always been polite and professional. "Mrs. Parker specified these perennials years ago," he was explaining. "They're established plants. I'm Mrs. Parker now." Vanessa snapped. "And I want everything redone." Immediately. I caught Margaret's eye, and we both quickly looked away to avoid laughing. The bitter irony of hearing Vanessa claim my former title wasn't lost on me, but oddly, it didn't sting as much as I might have expected. My phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Gonzalez. "Sorry to bother you, Mrs. Parker. I'm resigning from the property next door, but I'd be honored to continue maintaining your garden if you'll have me." I texted back immediately. "Of course, Mr. Gonzalez." And it's Ellen now. Flashback early warning signs. I should have recognized the warning signs years earlier. Perhaps I did, somewhere beneath the layers of rationalization and compromise that had become my armor. Richard had always been ambitious, even as a young banker from a modest background. His determination to prove himself had been part of his appeal when we met at a corporate function in Chicago. I'd been 29, working in public relations for a major firm, and he'd been 32, hungry to climb the corporate ladder. "I need someone who understands this world," he'd told me on our third date, his eyes intense as he described his career goals. "Someone smart who gets what it takes to succeed." I'd been flattered. My intelligence was being valued, appreciated. Only later would I understand the subtle distinction. He didn't want a partner. He wanted an asset. The pattern had established itself early. At dinner parties with colleagues, Richard would smoothly interject when I spoke about my own work. Ellen's being modest. She's actually helping me prepare the Davidson presentation. My achievements became footnotes to his narrative. When Amy was born, it seemed natural that I would scale back my career to raise her while supporting Richard's ascent. It's temporary, he assured me. Once she's in school, you can focus on your career again. But somehow, that moment never arrived. There was always a reason my career remained secondary. Richard needed help with a big client. The hours wouldn't work with Amy's schedule. The commute would be too stressful. Instead, I became the ghost writer of Richard's success, researching his presentations, editing his reports, strategizing approaches to difficult clients. He began introducing me at company functions as the real brains behind the operation, a compliment that rang hollow as it was never followed by actual credit or compensation. The turning point should have been the Singapore expansion project. I'd spent months researching Asian markets, creating detailed reports, and crafting culturally sensitive presentation materials. When Richard won an industry award for the project, he barely mentioned my contribution in his acceptance speech. I want to thank my supportive wife, Ellen. That night, as we drove home from the awards ceremony, I'd finally spoken up. Richard, I did more than support you. I created that entire presentation strategy. He'd seemed genuinely confused. But that's what we do, right? We're a team. I handle the client-facing work. You handle the background. A team implies equal recognition, I'd said quietly. When was the last time my name appeared on anything we worked on together? He'd patted my hand condescendingly. You've never seemed to care about the spotlight, Ellen. It's one of the things I love about you. After that conversation, I'd begun quietly maintaining copies of all the work I did for Richard. Not out of any specific plan for revenge, but from a growing awareness that my contributions deserved documentation. I also increased the amount I transferred to my private account each month. Not because I anticipated divorce, but because my mother's words about financial independence resonated more strongly with each passing year. The unraveling. The first serious cracks in Richard and Vanessa's relationship appeared about 2 months after they moved in together. I wasn't spying, exactly, but living next door meant I couldn't help overhearing some of their more dramatic confrontations. What do you mean, declined? Vanessa's voice carried across the yard one morning as I tended to my roses. Run it again. Through the kitchen window of my former home, I could see Richard in his bathrobe, phone pressed to his ear, his face a mask of controlled frustration. The bank flagged unusual activity. He was explaining, his voice tight. 3 consecutive charges at Bergdorf's totaling over $12,000. It's not unusual. Vanessa protested. I needed those things. You said to update my wardrobe for the charity gala. Update, not replace entirely, Richard snapped, his composure slipping. And not with the corporate card. I turned my attention back to my roses, feeling a strange mixture of satisfaction and pity. This drama wasn't my concern anymore, though I couldn't deny a certain karmic appreciation. My own focus had shifted dramatically. Following Margaret's encouragement, I'd submitted several articles to business journals under my own name. To my surprise and delight, they'd been well received, with editors requesting additional contributions. You have a natural talent for explaining complex business concepts in accessible language, one editor had written. We'd love to have you as a regular contributor. That email had arrived the same day I received an invitation to speak at a regional business conference, my first public recognition as an expert in my own right. I was in my study preparing for that speaking engagement when Amy arrived unexpectedly one evening, her college backpack slung over her shoulder. Surprise, she said, dropping her bag by the door. I thought I'd stay for the weekend, if that's okay. Always, I replied, noticing the shadows under her eyes. Everything all right? She slumped into the chair across from my desk. Dad and Vanessa were fighting again when I stopped by. It's exhausting. About what this time? I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. Money, mainly. Amy ran a hand through her dark hair, my hair, not Richard's. Vanessa maxed out all his credit cards. He found out when they were at dinner with some important client and his card got declined. A small, guilty smile crossed her face. I probably shouldn't find that satisfying, but karma has a certain poetry to it. I finished for her, returning her smile. How are you feeling about all of this? Amy was quiet for a moment, tracing the pattern on the arm of her chair. I was so angry at first. At Dad, mostly, and at her, for pretending we could be friends when she's barely older than me. She looked up, but now I just feel sorry for him. He seems lost. And the weird thing is, she hesitated. What? You seem found. Amy's perceptive eyes studied my face. I've never seen you like this before. So, yourself. Her observation struck me with unexpected force. Had I been so diminished in my marriage that my own daughter was only now seeing me clearly? I'm still figuring out who that is, I admitted. For a long time, I was Richard's wife or Amy's mom. Those were roles I cherished, but somewhere along the way, I stopped being Ellen. Amy nodded. Dad keeps asking me if you're seeing anyone. I think he assumes that's the only reason you could be happy without him. I laughed, genuinely amused. That would align with his worldview. A woman's happiness must revolve around a man, one way or another. Are you? Seeing anyone, I mean. No, I said honestly. I'm dating myself first. Getting reacquainted. Our conversation was interrupted by a commotion next door. We both instinctively moved to the window, where we could see Vanessa storming out of the house, designer suitcase in hand. I'm staying at the Four Seasons, she announced dramatically to Richard, who stood in the doorway. On your card. The declined ones? I murmured, making Amy snort with suppressed laughter. Richard noticed us watching and his face darkened. I stepped back from the window, suddenly ashamed of my voyeuristic moment. We shouldn't be watching this, I said, drawing the curtains. Their problems aren't our entertainment. Amy looked surprised. But after what he did to you, watching their relationship implode won't heal mine, I said gently. Besides, I have a presentation to prepare for. As I returned to my desk, Amy lingered by the window. Mom, she said suddenly, there's a man in a suit talking to Dad now. He looks upset. Despite my own admonition about voyeurism, curiosity got the better of me. I peered through the curtains to see Michael Bennett, the board chairman at Richard's company, engaged in what appeared to be a serious conversation. That's Michael Bennett, I said. He's on the board of directors at your father's company. We couldn't hear their conversation, but Richard's body language, defensive, then defeated, told its own story. Is Dad in trouble at work? Amy asked. I thought about the presentations Richard had no doubt been fumbling without my assistance, the client relationships I'd helped maintain for years, the scheduling and organizational support I'd provided that had suddenly disappeared. I imagine he's finding it difficult to maintain his usual standards, I said diplomatically. Your father is talented, but he relied on my support more than either of us acknowledged. That's a very generous way of putting it, Amy observed. I'd have said he took credit for your work for years and now he's being exposed. I smiled at my daughter's bluntness. That too, the opportunity. The regional business conference exceeded all my expectations. My presentation on crisis communication strategies received enthusiastic applause, and afterward, several executives approached me with consulting opportunities. Your case studies were particularly compelling, one woman said, handing me her business card. We'd love to have you come speak to our management team. Margaret, who had accompanied me for moral support, was practically glowing with satisfaction. What did I tell you? She whispered as we made our way to the hotel bar for a celebratory drink. You're a natural at this. It felt good, I admitted, still buzzing with adrenaline. To speak in my own voice, present my own ideas. Without Richard taking credit, Margaret finished, ordering us both glasses of champagne. To Ellen Parker, finally stepping into the spotlight she deserves. We clinked glasses just as my phone buzzed with a text from Amy. Mr. Bennett came by looking for you. Says it's important. Call when you can. Margaret raised an eyebrow. Michael Bennett? The board chairman? Apparently he stopped by my house, I replied, puzzled. Looking for me, not Richard. Interesting, Margaret said, her eyes speculative. Very interesting. I called Michael as soon as I returned to my hotel room. His deep voice answered immediately. Ellen, thank you for returning my call. I hope I'm not interrupting your evening. Not at all, I replied, kicking off my heels and settling onto the hotel bed. Amy said you stopped by? Yes. He cleared his throat. I wanted to speak with you about a sensitive matter regarding Parker Investments. A flutter of anxiety passed through me. Despite everything, part of me still instinctively worried about Richard's career. Is everything all right? Frankly, no, Michael said. The board has serious concerns about Richard's recent performance. Several major clients have complained about disorganized presentations, missed meetings, and a general decline in service quality. I remained silent, unsure how to respond. These problems weren't surprising given Richard's sudden loss of my behind-the-scenes support, but I felt no obligation to point this out. Michael continued, through some discussions with staff and a review of past work, we've come to understand that you are heavily involved in many aspects of the company's client relationships and strategic communications. I supported Richard's work, yes. I acknowledged carefully. Ellen, Michael's voice took on a direct quality I'd always appreciated about him. Let's be candid. We found evidence suggesting you were not merely supporting but creating substantial portions of the work Richard presented as his own. Presentations, client strategies, even the Singapore expansion that won him that industry award. My heart raced. I'm not sure what you're asking me, Michael. I'm not asking anything yet. I'm telling you that the board has been examining this situation closely. We've also been following your recent articles in business journals and heard about your successful presentation at the regional conference. I sat up straighter. You have? The business community isn't as large as people think, Michael said, a smile evident in his voice. Word gets around when someone makes an impression. I appreciate your interest in my work, I said cautiously. It's more than interest, Ellen. The board has been discussing the future leadership of our public relations department. The current director is retiring next month, and we need someone with vision and proven ability. My breath caught. Are you offering me a position? I'm suggesting we have a formal conversation about it, Michael replied. Given your expertise and your intimate knowledge of our company's operations, you would be an exceptional candidate. The irony wasn't lost on me being offered a position at the company where my contributions had gone unrecognized for years. Yet instead of bitterness, I felt a surge of validation. I would be interested in that conversation, I said. Excellent. There is, of course, the matter of Richard, who reports to the board, not to PR, I pointed out, and who I maintained a professional relationship with during our marriage when collaborating on work projects. Precisely my thinking, Michael said, sounding pleased. Could you meet with the board next Tuesday? Say, 10 o'clock? After hanging up, I sat motionless on the hotel bed, processing the unexpected turn of events. My phone buzzed again, another text from Amy. Dad came by looking for you too. Seemed upset about Bennett's visit. What's going on? I texted back. Possible job opportunity. I'll explain when I'm home tomorrow. Her reply was immediate. With Dad's company? Is that weird or brilliant? I smiled, echoing Dan's words from months earlier. Let's go with brilliant. The confrontation. The board meeting was scheduled for Tuesday at 10, but I arrived at Parker Investments at 9:30, allowing myself time to compose my thoughts. The receptionist, a young woman I'd met at various company functions, greeted me with surprise. Mrs. Parker. Ms. Parker. Ellen is fine, Jenna, I said gently, noting her discomfort. Mr. Parker is in his office, she said, clearly uncertain about protocol in this unprecedented situation. Would you like me to tell him you're here? No need, I replied. I'm here for a meeting with the board. Her eyes widened slightly. Of course. The Maple Conference Room. Can I get you anything while you wait? Coffee would be wonderful, thank you. I settled into one of the comfortable chairs in the reception area, taking in the familiar surroundings. Though I had visited Parker Investments many times over the years for company functions, I had always been there as Richard's wife. Today, I was Ellen Parker, professional. The elevator doors opened, and Richard emerged, stopping abruptly when he saw me. For a moment, he looked exactly as he had 25 years ago when we first met, confident, handsome, slightly intimidating. Then I noticed the new lines around his eyes, the slight dishevelment of his usually impeccable appearance. "Ellen," he said, his voice carefully controlled as he approached. "What are you doing here?" I stood, smoothing the lapels of my navy blazer. "I have a meeting with the board." His expression darkened. "About what?" "That's between me and the board," I replied calmly. "Is this about me?" he demanded, lowering his voice as a pair of employees walked by, nodding respectfully to both of us. "Are you trying to undermine me now?" The accusation might have hurt months ago. Now, it merely revealed how thoroughly Richard viewed the world through the lens of his own interests. "Not everything is about you, Richard," I said quietly. "Though I understand why you might think so, given our history." Before he could respond, Michael appeared in the doorway of the conference room. "Ellen, we're ready for you." His eyes moved to Richard. "Richard, I don't believe you have any meetings scheduled with the board today." Richard's jaw tightened. "As CEO, I should be present for all board meetings concerning company operations." Michael's expression remained professional but firm. "This is a personnel matter that doesn't require your input at this time. We'll brief you afterward if necessary." I could see the struggle in Richard's face, the desire to assert his authority battling with the knowledge that challenging the board chairman directly would be unwise. "We'll discuss this later," he said to me, the warning in his tone unmistakable. "Looking forward to it," I replied with a small smile, then followed Michael into the conference room. The meeting itself was surprisingly straightforward. The board had reviewed my qualifications, read my published articles, and spoken with several industry contacts who had attended my conference presentation. "We need someone who can modernize our communications strategy while maintaining the relationships you've already helped build with clients," Michael explained as the other board members nodded in agreement. "The PR director position is yours if you want it, Ellen." "With full departmental autonomy," added Martha Chen, another board member I'd known for years. "And reporting directly to the board, not to the CEO." The implication was clear. I would not be working under Richard, but beside him as an equal executive. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully, "but I do have a few conditions of my own." Michael leaned forward. "We're listening." "I want to continue my independent consulting practice part-time. And I'd like to start a mentorship program for women in business, with company support." The board members exchanged glances, then Michael nodded. Both reasonable requests. "Anything else?" I took a deep breath. I want it understood that I earned this position through my qualifications and experience, not as some kind of settlement in my personal situation with Richard. Martha smiled approvingly. "That's precisely why we're offering it to you, Ellen. Your credentials speak for themselves." As I left the conference room an hour later, contract in hand, Richard was waiting in the reception area, his expression stormy. "What happened?" he demanded when I approached. I considered how to respond, weighing the satisfaction of a dramatic reveal against the dignity of restraint. "The board has appointed me as the new director of public relations and corporate communications," I said simply. Richard's face went through a remarkable series of expressions: shock, confusion, anger, and finally, a dawning comprehension. "They can't do that without consulting me." "Actually, they can." And did. I moved past him toward the elevator. "I start next Monday." "Ellen," he called, causing me to pause and turn back. "This is my company." I regarded him steadily. "No, or Richard. It's a public company with shareholders and a board of directors. You're the CEO, a position the board can reconsider at any time." I softened my tone slightly. "We'll be colleagues now. I suggest we find a way to work together professionally." His face flushed. "After everything. You'd work here? See me every day?" "I'll be focused on doing my job excellently," I replied. "Just as I always have been, whether I receive credit for it or not." As the elevator doors closed between us, I caught a glimpse of something I'd rarely seen on Richard's face: genuine uncertainty. Vanessa's exit, the corporate landscape wasn't the only area experiencing seismic shifts. 3 days after my board meeting, I returned home from grocery shopping to find moving trucks parked in Richard's driveway. Amy, who had been staying with me for the week, met me at the door with a barely suppressed grin. "You're just in time for the show," she said, helping me with the grocery bags. "Vanessa's moving out, and she's trying to take everything that isn't bolted down." From our vantage point in the kitchen, we could see Vanessa directing movers to load not just her personal belongings, but furniture, artwork, and electronics into the waiting trucks. "That painting is mine." Richard's voice carried across the lawn as he attempted to reclaim a canvas from a mover's hands. "It was here long before you moved in. My lawyer says I'm entitled to half of everything." Vanessa shouted back, her designer outfit a stark contrast to her undignified behavior. "You promised me a certain lifestyle, Richard." "I never promised you my family heirlooms," he retorted, actually pulling at a silver serving tray as Vanessa held the other end. "Should we do something?" Amy asked, looking torn between concern and amusement. I shook my head. "This is between them. And possibly the courts." "Mom," Amy's voice grew serious. "She's trying to take Grandma's china cabinet. The one she left specifically to you." That gave me pause. Richard's mother had indeed bequeathed her antique china cabinet to me, appreciative of how I'd honored family traditions over the years. In the chaos of my hasty departure, I hadn't even thought to claim it. "That might warrant an intervention," I conceded, setting down my grocery bags. We crossed the lawn together, approaching the increasingly chaotic scene. Dan Thompson had apparently also noticed the commotion and was observing from the sidewalk with barely concealed interest. "Richard," I called calmly as we drew near. "A word, please." He turned, momentarily releasing his grip on the serving tray, which Vanessa promptly handed to a mover with a triumphant "Ha." "Ellen, this isn't a good time," Richard said, his normally perfect hair disheveled, his tie askew. "I can see that. However, I believe your mother's china cabinet is about to be loaded onto that truck, and as it was specifically left to me in her will, I'd like to reclaim it." Vanessa, who had been directing movers toward the very cabinet in question, whirled around. "That cabinet is worth thousands, and I need it for my new apartment. It's a family heirloom with sentimental value," I replied evenly. "And legally, it belongs to me." "She's right," Richard admitted reluctantly. "My mother left it specifically to Ellen." Vanessa's face contorted with anger. "Fine, take your stupid cabinet. But I'm still entitled to half of everything else." Actually, Dan Thompson stepped forward, his former lawyer persona fully engaged. "As you and Richard were not married, and assuming there was no formal cohabitation agreement specifying property division, you're legally entitled only to items you personally purchased or that were explicitly given to you as gifts." Vanessa's glare could have melted steel. "Who asked you, old man?" "Dan Thompson." He introduced himself pleasantly. "Retired family law attorney. A neighbor with an excellent view of this entire proceedings, should witness testimony ever be required." Richard shot Dan a look that was part irritation, part gratitude. "Vanessa, we can discuss this reasonably. There's no need to strip the house bare." "Reasonably?" She scoffed. "Like how you reasonably expected me to organize your entire life while paying for everything with my own credit cards? Or how you reasonably expected me to be a mother to your adult daughter?" Amy raised an eyebrow. "You tried to ground me when I was home from college. I was establishing boundaries." Vanessa snapped. "I decided it was time to extract ourselves from this domestic drama. Richard, I'll arrange to have the china cabinet moved to my house this week." "Amy, shall we?" As we turned to leave, Vanessa called after me. "This is all your fault. Everything was fine until you moved in next door and started undermining us." I paused, considering my response carefully. "Vanessa, I didn't create any of the problems in your relationship. I've been focused on rebuilding my own life, not sabotaging yours." "Then why are you taking his job?" she demanded. I corrected her gently. "I'm not taking anyone's job. I was offered a position based on my qualifications, which I accepted." "She's going to be seeing you every day at work." Vanessa turned to Richard accusingly. "While I'm supposed to just accept that." Richard's expression was pained. "The board made that decision without consulting me." "Right?" Vanessa's voice dripped with sarcasm. Nothing to do with the fact that she kept records of all your inappropriate emails to female clients? Nothing to do with the fact that she apparently did half your job for years? I felt a flash of sympathy for Richard, despite everything. Having his professional vulnerabilities exposed so publicly, especially by someone he trusted, was a particular kind of humiliation. Vanessa, I said quietly, I think you and Richard have personal matters to resolve without an audience. Back in my house, Amy helped me put away the groceries in thoughtful silence. Finally, she asked, do you ever feel sorry for Dad? I considered the question carefully. Yes, I admitted. Not for the consequences of his choices, but for the fact that he's never seemed to understand what truly matters. Like what? Like the fact that real success isn't about appearances or status. It's about integrity, meaningful connections, creating something worthwhile. I smiled at my daughter. Like the fact that the most important thing he ever helped create was you. Amy hugged me suddenly. I'm really proud of you, Mom. For all of it, the job, the house, the way you've handled everything. Through the window, we could see the moving trucks pulling away, Richard standing alone in the driveway looking lost and defeated. I just hope he figures out what he really wants, Amy said, following my gaze. Before it's too late. Flashback the subtle warnings. What's ironic is that Richard's mother tried to warn me in her own way. During one of our rare private conversations, about 10 years into my marriage, Eleanor Parker had taken my hand and spoken with unusual directness. Men in the Parker family have a particular blindness, she'd said, her aristocratic features softened by concern. They mistake admiration for love and achievement for worth. We'd been in her garden, the same garden where she taught me about heirloom roses and perennial planting. Her husband, Richard's father, had been a successful banker too, charming, ambitious, and often absent. Did you ever regret marrying into this family? I'd asked, emboldened by her candor. Eleanor had considered the question, her fingers gently pruning a climbing rose. No, but I did regret losing myself in it for a time. She'd fixed me with a penetrating look. Don't make that mistake, Ellen. My son loves you, but he's his father's son. He'll take everything you offer without realizing the cost to you. At the time, I dismissed her words as the slightly bitter perspective of an older generation. Now, 15 years later, they echoed with prophetic clarity. Eleanor had left me her china cabinet in her will 5 years ago, with a note that read, for Ellen, who understands the value of preserving beautiful things, especially when others cannot see their worth. I wondered now if she had been talking about the cabinet at all. The resolution, the mentorship program for women in business, became my passion project at Parker Investments. 6 months after joining the company as PR director, I had recruited 15 mentors and 30 mentees, creating structured programming that included skill development, networking opportunities, and personal growth workshops. The board is impressed, Michael told me after I presented the program's initial results at a quarterly meeting. Morale in the female staff population is up significantly, and we've already seen improved retention numbers. Thank you, I replied. It's meaningful work. Richard and I had established a professional détente, communicating when necessary for business purposes and maintaining a careful distance otherwise. He had moved from our former house into a downtown apartment, selling the property to a young family with children close to college age. From my balcony, I could sometimes see the new family's daughter studying at the desk in what had once been my home office, the same desk where I had written countless presentations for which Richard had received credit. There was a pleasing symmetry to it now. Amy visited regularly, dividing her time between her campus apartment and my house. Richard saw her for occasional dinners, their relationship slowly mending as he made genuine efforts to know her as a person rather than an extension of himself. He asked about my thesis today, Amy reported after one such dinner. Actually listened to my explanation about feminist literature in post-war America without checking his phone once. Progress, I acknowledged with a small smile. He also asked about you, she added cautiously. How you're doing, if you're seeing anyone. And what did you tell him? Amy shrugged. The truth, that you're thriving professionally, active socially, and focused on yourself right now. I nodded, appreciating her discretion. The truth was more complex, of course. There had been one dinner with Dan Thompson that might have been categorized as a date, though neither of us had labeled it as such. And Margaret had recently introduced me to her brother, a kind-eyed professor who had asked for my number. But I was in no rush. For the first time in decades, I was making decisions based solely on my own desires and needs. That freedom was too precious to compromise prematurely. My thoughts were interrupted by the doorbell. When I answered, I was surprised to find Richard standing there, looking unexpectedly formal in a suit despite the weekend. "Richard," I said, unable to keep the surprise from my voice. "Is everything all right? May I come in?" he asked, his tone unusually subdued. "Just for a moment. There's something I need to say to you." I hesitated, then stepped back to allow him entry. Amy, who had been reading in the living room, looked up with raised eyebrows. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "I needed to speak with your mother," he replied, then turned to me. "Privately, if possible." Amy gathered her book. "I'll be upstairs." Once she had left, an awkward silence settled between us. Richard looked around the house, taking in the changes I'd made, the warm colors I'd painted the walls, the bookcases filled with volumes I'd always wanted to display, the framed articles I'd published under my own name. "You've made this place your own," he observed. "That was the point," I replied, gesturing for him to sit. "What did you want to discuss?" Richard remained standing, his posture formal. "I wanted to apologize," he said, the words clearly difficult for him. "Not just for how our marriage ended, but for a lot of things." I waited, giving him space to continue. "I've been doing some reflection," he went on, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Therapy, actually. My behavior with Vanessa, the issues at work, it forced me to examine patterns in my life. This was unexpected. In 25 years of marriage, I'd never known Richard to seek therapy or admit to needing outside perspective. "I'm glad you're getting help," I said sincerely. "The therapist asked me to make a list of people I've hurt," he continued. "You were at the top." He met my eyes directly. "Ellen, I took you for granted. I took credit for your work. I made decisions that affected both our lives without truly consulting you. And when I found someone who made me feel young and important again, I threw away 25 years without a second thought." The raw honesty in his voice caught me off guard. This wasn't the polished, controlled Richard I knew. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because you deserve to hear it," he replied simply. "And because I need to say it. Not for forgiveness, I don't expect that, but because it's true, and acknowledging the truth is apparently part of growth." The slight self-deprecation in his tone was also new. "I appreciate that," I said carefully. "And I hope therapy continues to be helpful for you." Richard nodded, then reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew an envelope. "There's one other thing. I've been working with my lawyer on this. It's not an attempt to win you back or change anything between us. Just something I should have done months ago." I took the envelope hesitantly. "It's a revised financial settlement," he explained. "The original division didn't account for the value of your contributions to my career. This attempts to rectify that." Inside the envelope was a legal document transferring a significant portion of Richard's investment portfolio and retirement accounts into my name, far exceeding what we'd originally negotiated. "Richard," I began, uncertain how to respond. "Please don't refuse it," he said quickly. "It's not generosity, it's fairness. Something I should have understood a long time ago." For a moment, I glimpsed the young man I had fallen in love with, earnest, capable of growth, willing to acknowledge mistakes. It didn't erase the pain of the past year, but it did soften something that had been hardened inside me. "Thank you," I said simply. "I accept." Relief crossed his face. "There's one more thing. The therapist suggested I ask if there's anything you want to say to me. Anything I should hear." I considered the question carefully, weighing the accumulated hurts and recognitions of the past months. "Yes," I decided. "There is." Richard braced himself visibly. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Richard," I said gently. "I really do. Not just professionally, but personally. I hope you learn to value yourself for who you are, not what you achieve or who admires you." Surprise flickered across his face, followed by a more complex emotion I couldn't quite name. I, thank you, Ellen. That's more gracious than I deserve. After he left, I remained seated, processing the unexpected interaction. Amy descended the stairs cautiously. Everything okay? She asked. Yes, I said, realizing it was true. I think it actually is. Epilogue of the dinner. To new beginnings, Margaret raised her glass, the candlelight reflecting off the crystal as our small gathering echoed the toast. 6 months after Richard's apology, I was hosting a dinner party in my garden, the first since the divorce. The paper lanterns strung overhead cast a warm glow as evening settled over us. Around the table sat the people who had become my support system and, more importantly, my chosen family. Margaret, Dan Thompson, Amy and her new boyfriend, and a few colleagues from the mentorship program. And to old wisdom, Amy added, glancing at me with a smile. Like Grandma Parker's saying about beautiful things being worth preserving. I touched the delicate pendant at my throat, a gift I had given myself to celebrate the first anniversary of my independence. Indeed. Ellen, Dan raised his glass specifically to me, his kind eyes warm, to your extraordinary resilience and grace. I felt a flush that had nothing to do with the wine. Dan and I had been seeing each other casually for a few months now, taking things slowly, both of us careful with our newly discovered second chances at happiness. I have news, actually, I said, setting down my glass. The mentorship program is being expanded nationally. 5 other companies have adopted our model, and I've been asked to speak at a White House conference on women in business next month. The table erupted in congratulations and questions, the conversation flowing easily as twilight deepened around us. From the corner of my eye, I caught a movement across the lawn, Richard, returning to his former house to collect the last of his belongings before the new family moved in completely. He paused, noticing our gathering, and after a moment's hesitation, raised his hand in a small, acknowledging wave. I returned the gesture, feeling neither anger nor regret, just a quiet recognition of our shared past and divergent futures. Everything good? Dan asked quietly, noticing the exchange. Yes, I smiled, turning back to the warmth of my table. Everything is exactly as it should be. Later, as my guests helped clear dishes and Amy arranged coffee cups for dessert, I stepped away briefly to stand at the edge of my garden. The Japanese maples I'd planted had grown remarkably in a year, their delicate leaves creating patterns against the night sky. From this vantage point, I could see both houses, my former home being prepared for a new family story, and my current home glowing with life and laughter. Sometimes the most powerful revelation isn't dramatic vindication or epic revenge, but the quiet understanding that you have always been enough exactly as you are. The knowledge that when everything familiar is stripped away, what remains is your essential self, and that self is not just sufficient, but extraordinary. I returned to my guests, to my chosen family, to the life I was building not in reaction to loss, but in celebration of discovery. And as I looked around my table at these beloved faces, I understood with perfect clarity that the house next door had never been my destination. It had merely been the first step on my journey home to myself.